Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the Canterbury Business Improvement District Annual Conference and AGM. It's 2 o'clock, so we're going to make a start with welcome and introductions as people sign on. We're really pleased that so many of you could join us today from sectors all across the city. And we also welcome some of our Canterbury City councillors, as well as members of residents' associations, two of whom sit on our board as observers. And I think we have with us today a really good representation of the city. So my name is Lisa Carlson. I'm the Chief Executive of Canterbury's Business Improvement District, and I'll be hosting this session today on Zoom with Clive Ralph, who's a tax partner at Creston Reeves and our bid board chair, and also with Rachel Pillard, who's our Marketing and Communications Manager. And we also welcome today Professor Kathy Parker, who will be our speaker, who will introduce properly a bit later. So we are expecting over 60 attendees on this Zoom session today, which is fantastic, including the bid board, who I will just bring up on the slides. Because normally when we gather like this, we've just had tea and coffee together. We've had a chance to talk with you, but we can't quite do that in this setting. So this is the bid board who are all on the Zoom call today. We've got one addition, Mark Stewart, who is the new Whitefriars Centre manager, as Peter Scott left. So I'm going to hand over to Rachel now in just a minute, who Rachel's going to talk us through how this Zoom call is going to work. I'm sure you're all experts by now, but just in case. And then we'll come back to me for a few minutes before heading over to Clive for the AGM part of the session. Rachel.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. As Lisa said, we're sure you're probably all experts in Zoom by now, but just in case this is your first time, you have some buttons at the bottom of your screen. You'll see that there is a Q&A section, and there's also a chat section and a wave section. I'm sure you're going to have a huge amount of questions for all of us today, and we would request that you put all of those in the Q&A section. That'll allow both Lisa and myself to be able to read out questions and answer them. You can make yourself anonymous if you would prefer not to mention who you are, but that's where we'd like you to keep all your questions. And if anything comes to mind while we're talking about something else, you can still put it in the Q&A and we'll come back to it at a relevant moment. So that's your Q&A section. There's also chat. Now, if you have any technical problems, pop your questions in chat and I'll be keeping an eye on that as well. And also, as of last week, we have discovered the joy of polls on Zoom, which we think are great fun. Now, because there are so many of you today, we thought it would be lovely to just give a poll a go, get a picture of who is in this with the AGM with us. So I've created a little poll and I would love it if you could all take part in it. I'm going to put it up on the screen right now. It's a very straightforward one. We're not asking anything too tricky. We'd just like you to select which sector best describes your business. And I'm going to launch this poll right now. And I'm going to leave it on the screen for a minute, just so you can make your way through the system and read all the potential answers. So we've got retail, restaurant, cafe, pub, bar, club, accommodation, professional business services, arts and culture, education, attraction, or other. Now, if there's other, we would love you to pop in the other into the Q&A so we know which other business sectors we have on the call. So I think I might just give you another 10 seconds actually. We're up to 84% voted. And let's see if we get any more. No, I'm going to end the polling. Oh, no, we've gone up to 40. Excellent. Right, I'm going to stop the polling here and I'm going to share the results so you can see who we have on with us at the AGM. Now, there are actually 14 others there, so please do pop in what your business sector is at the bottom so we all know who's here. But thank you very much for taking part in the poll, and I shall stop sharing the results now. And Lisa, back to you.
Thank you very much for that, Rachel. I'm going to hand over to Clive now, who is going to talk us through the agenda and also through the AGM part of this session.
Yeah, hi everybody. I've just lost my screen, isn't it embarrassing? Sorry. Yeah, so thank you very much for that, Lisa. Thank you, Rachel, for the poll. All good fun. Welcome everyone this afternoon. Thanks for supporting this event, our AGM conference in such strong numbers. Our first virtual one, and speaking personally, probably I quite like it to be our last virtual one, because I'd much rather meet you all face to face. As Lisa mentioned, we'll be hearing from Professor Kathy Parker a bit shortly. She's a bid guru, currently chair of one of the bid industry groups based in Manchester, and she's also part of the government's High Street Task Force. She'll be talking about the road to recovery post-coronavirus, so I'm very much looking forward to what Kathy has to say. And you'll also be hearing from Lisa about Canterbury and our own road to recovery. So there'll be opportunities to ask questions for both, or from myself, from Lisa, and from Kathy. So here's our agenda. We have my initial welcome and the AGM and the accounts we're going to go through quite quickly. Lisa will then give us an update about what the bid's been doing since March and the way ahead potentially in terms of reopening the high street. And then we hear from Professor Kathy Parker on a broader countrywide take on how things have been and how things might be in the future. I'll be taking questions after my accounts bit. Lisa will be taking questions after her update bit, as will Kathy. So please type them in as Rachel explained, and then hopefully we can get some conversation going. Okay, well, as you know, the bid is a not-for-profit company. We're primarily funded by you, our levy payers, of whom there are about 600, and levies are based on rateable values. And what that means in English is that our lowest rated levy payer pays us £39 a year, and the top one pays us £12,500 a year. Add all those figures together and you get £500,000 of income, as shown on our next slide. So these are our accounts for the year to September 2019. This is just an abbreviated version of them. The full accounts were available on the link that invited you to attend today. Don't worry if you didn't catch them, they're also on our website, but these are just a snapshot of what happened in the year to September 2019. As I said, our levy varies from one end to the other, and in total it's £503,000 last year. The directors and the bid team managed to pull together some extra income, giving us gross income of 582. And in the year to September 2019, we invested that across various headings, as you'll see from that one-page snapshot. So in fact, we expended £583,000 last year, using £1,000 of our reserves, and similar numbers from previous years. In terms of headlights, well, obviously, our bid team is our biggest and greatest asset. We have 5 full-timers, although we did have 5 full-timers until we furloughed 3 of them, about which more later. Christmas is huge for the city, and we get great press coverage for our festivities, which is our second most expensive item on the list. I hope you've seen the new hanging baskets are up already this year, and they'll be looking great in a week or two in time for the city getting back to life again. You know what our ambassadors are. We invested slightly less last year than the previous year, and we invested less on events and promotions, primarily because in the previous year we invested £30,000 with Visit Kent on a new destination management plan for Canterbury. We know also you enjoy our networking and our communications and our My Canterbury provision. So in the year we invested £75,000 there. And then other overheads, including the cost of collecting our levy, are down the bottom. So that was our income account for the year to September 2019. And then if we can just go to the next slide to look at our balance sheet. So as at September 2019, we had reserves of £106,000. We had in fact budgeted to have something slightly less than that. We had expected to have reserves of about £70,000, which was a provision should we not get through last summer's ballot to win a second term. So we have had 5 years now. Our 5 years came up in October 2019. We didn't know we'd get a second term, so we budgeted to keep £70,000 in reserve to cover the costs of redundancies and closing down the bid. But luckily, thank you all, our levy payers voted us back in with a much stronger mandate than we had initially. And so we're here for another 5 years, taking us up to September 2024. We start the year with reserves of £106,000. Then, of course, we started this year and COVID came along. Luckily, we had managed to collect some 80% of our 2019 levy before the lockdown. That said, as things stand, our revised budgets show our income will be some £110,000 less than we had expected, and thus our finance subcommittee met to consider how we can make the numbers work and managed to identify commensurate savings, with the result that your bid remains solvent, and I'm confident as chair that we have the finances to see us through for the foreseeable future. We have made cutbacks, of course, like every business in the city. We did furlough 3 of our 5 staff early on. We aren't eligible for either of the government's grants that have been administered so well by Canterbury Council. So to put that in context, about 420 grants, there's some for £10,000 and some for £25,000 have been administered by the Canterbury City Council on behalf of Canterbury businesses, adding up to about £7 million. But our bid wasn't eligible for either of those grants. But notwithstanding that, we have, by careful stewardship, managed to ensure that the bid will continue to deliver benefits for you all as levy payers. But I would like to thank the council for dealing so well with many of our levy payers in handing out these government grants that came in. Can we have the next slide, please? Yes, no? I'm still looking at the same slide. Oh, here we go. No, we've done the balance sheet. Okay, so at this stage, Rachel, Lisa, are there any finance type questions that have come in whilst I've been talking?
No, nothing.
No, okay. So these accounts, or the abbreviated version I've just shown you, the full accounts have been prepared by our external accountants, Burgess Hodgson, and thank you very much for them. They were then reviewed by our finance subcommittee and then approved by the bid board a couple of months ago, in fact. So they are good to go. And if there are no questions, we will therefore lodge those at Companies House. But I say, if anybody wants to look at them in more detail, they are on our website and they will shortly be at Companies House. Also at the AGM, we would normally have invited levy payers to put themselves forward to stand for the new bid board. Our articles say that we have now the opportunity to refresh our board. And so if any of you online today fancy a go at being a bid director, please watch out for our newsletters. We are slightly a few months behind the pace, forgive us, because of things I don't need to talk about, but we will be looking for some new board members to join us, bring in their own ideas. So please keep your eye out for that, an opportunity, or if you don't see anything, talk to Lisa or Rachel or me, and we can organise that for you. I'm afraid there's no money involved in being a bid director. It's all pro bono, but it does give you a chance to give back. And is also an opportunity to get to know some more Canterbury business folk. So we're done with the accounts. I'll give you an update, to confirm that we are financially solvent and we're going to be here for the long term. We have just won a second term, as I said, to September 2024. seems a long way away. You can't predict too much these days. But before handing back to Lisa, I would just say, if it needs saying, that we're lucky to have a great team in Canterbury, a great bid team. Lisa and Rachel and all of them have done sterling effort in the last year and the years before that. And I'm also enormously grateful to my co-directors of the bid. There's about 15 of us all together. Lisa showed you their photos a few minutes ago. So thanks to all of you guys, and not just guys, that's dreadfully sexist. Thanks to all of you, and look forward to working with you some more going forwards. Lisa, where are we going next?
Clive, thank you. I'm just having a little look to see if we've got any questions or comments. No, nothing yet. But if you do think of anything as this goes along, please feel free to type your questions in as we go. Rachel and I will be monitoring that, and if it makes sense just to pick up on it, we can do that. Otherwise, we'll wait till the end of each section. And thank you also for bearing with us in this format. I know we're all used to it by now, but we do miss seeing your faces very much. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the plans in Canterbury to bring you up to speed with what the bid has been doing and where we go from here. So we all know that we're in hugely unprecedented and challenging times, and I think it's important to be realistic about that. And about the long road to recovery that we face, particularly given the importance of the tourism and education sectors in Canterbury. But actually, this crisis has touched all sectors. And we've already seen across the country some permanent closures. Sadly for us, we've lost for now the Canterbury Tales, who we remember very fondly. But we also know there are many other sectors that have been hit. And so the case studies that we've been gathering from you, the detailed information we've heard from you over these last few months, has been really, really important to feed through to decision makers, both locally and nationally. That said, I also think it's important to comment on the incredible creativity and innovation that we've seen over the last few months in the ways that our city, our businesses, and our community has responded, and the ever-evolving recovery plans that are emerging from different sectors that do give us hope for the future. So as Clive mentioned, since the beginning of the crisis in March, we acted quickly to protect your interests and your investment, it's your money, by furloughing 3 members of staff, and also by postponing projects and activities so that they could be reinstated when they are of most benefit to you and to the city. That time is now upon us. And so I'll comment more on that in a moment about where we go in terms of investing your levy. Since lockdown, we've been working really closely at a local and national level. In Canterbury and in Kent, that's been with all of you, with Canterbury City Council, with Visit Kent, Canterbury for Business, the Kent and Victor Chamber of Commerce, and Locate in Kent. Less so with KCC, and we do need to come on to that a bit later about some of the challenges there. On a national level, we work with the Association of Town and City Management, where I sit on the board, and the Institute of Place Management, which is where Kathy is from, and also the BID Foundation. They have all worked tirelessly to lobby and support towns and cities, reporting into the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government and the Treasury throughout this crisis. It's our role as a BID team and a board to ensure that your voice is heard through these challenging times. Which is why all of that local and national and regional collaboration is so important. And we're not going to relax that pressure at all. We'll keep asking the right questions, engaging with you to support you and our city. I just wanted to show you real quick, I won't spend too much time on this, but the Institute of Place Management has held some really helpful webinar sessions that Rachel and I have been attending, where we've been able to hear more about what other towns and cities are doing. They've also developed a 4-stage COVID-19 recovery framework, which is designed to help us plan for recovery and in particular to develop the capacity for longer term transformation. And we've seen other towns and cities use this across the UK. I won't keep this up for very long. It will be on our website. But I wanted to talk in particular about how we've adapted this for Canterbury. this particular framework and how we're going from the crisis to pre-recovery phase and what that actually means for us. So since lockdown, during the crisis phase, we focused on signposting, communicating, on managing your bid levy in the best way that we could. Lots of lobbying, training, of course, and collaboration, lots of data gathering that's been really important, both consumer preference data, but also business impact. And promoting the businesses and the city for those businesses who could stay open in some way. So we've been running a series of webinars. We've run 10 of them, training sessions and webinars since lockdown, on everything from how the financial crisis impacts us as individuals, to legal guidance, to digital marketing. And a few weeks ago, we launched a new In Conversation series where we're gathering businesses together to share your knowledge and ensure that your views help shape the road to recovery. If you've missed any, they're available on our website, that's canterburybid.co.uk, both the recordings and the slides. And through these sessions, even through these challenging times, we've been able to engage with over 100 businesses over the last few months. And again, that feedback has gone straight to decision makers. We've also promoted the businesses who were able to stay open, who have been able to stay open in some way through My Canterbury, and that's using emails and social media and so on. And we've seen a huge response to that. We're the first in the city to launch this online promotional service for businesses and for our community, working collaboratively initially with Produced in Kent, and there's also a Kent-based marketing agency called Digital Beans, who developed a free service for retail and food and beverage businesses to offer online ordering so they could adapt as quickly as possible. And we've also been promoting the community hub offered by Canterbury City Council and have engaged with various community groups on Facebook. And all of that has been invaluable in connecting our businesses and our community through this crisis. So we are now in the pre-recovery phase, and the planning, training, data gathering, promoting, signposting, all of that will continue. But I just want to, in the few minutes I have before we take some more questions and polling, and before I hand over to Kathy, I want to just touch on the bid business plan and where we go from here and what's happening operationally in the city. So in our business plan, we committed to providing leadership to represent you as levy payers, to ensure a strong voice on the issues that matter most to you. We committed to promoting and animating the city, to supporting and representing you, and to improving the experiences for everyone who works, lives, visits, and studies. That will continue. The exact method and timings of some of that is understandably going to have to change. Christmas is a quick example. We're definitely still planning on putting up the Christmas lights, but the switch on event itself might not happen in the same way it has in previous years. There'll be other changes, and we will be communicating with you and gathering your feedback as we go forward. So in the last few minutes I have, I want to touch on some of the operational considerations for recovery and reopening that have come up, particularly in the last few weeks. Now, much of this is outside of our control, but we are working really closely with the City Council and with others to make sure that what you've been observing and experiencing is taken into account. So with cleaning, you may have noticed that Canterbury City Council cleaned quite a lot of graffiti over the last weekend. There's still a bit more to do, and we've been working with them to try and provide waivers to make sure that you've given permission for that to happen and to identify the areas that need it most. We're also waiting for a schedule, I think any day now, on cleaning the pavements, and we will let you know when that's going to happen. And that's also through Canterbury City Council. The promotional and marketing activity will absolutely continue, and we're working with Visit Kent and Visit Canterbury. We're talking about, with tourism and destination management, they have developed, and we're working with them to develop a 12 to 18 month phased recovery plan, because I think we all know we're in this for the long run, and there's going to be a lot of change between now and then, but we will play our part in terms of providing content, video content, images, working on campaigns about how we can present our city in the best possible way. Transport is another area that you've been asking a lot about. Certain car parks did close in the beginning stages of the crisis, which made sense. Some of them have since opened, and more of them will open as the need arises. And we will be posting a list of those on our website, and the council also has that on their website. And I think we will hopefully hear some more news about that today or tomorrow. Park and Ride, as I understand it, is closed until September. A lot of challenges around that, but if there are any updates around that, we'll be sure to let you know. We've also heard a lot from you about whether we could have more cycle racks in the city centre, as we are encouraged to walk and cycle more at the same time as don't use public transport and drive. So these are two really difficult things to balance, but we would love to look for sources of funding for cycle racks, and I know that that falls within KCC's purview, but that is something we're looking at as well. Just a few other things that you've been asking about. So the bollards that have been put up around the city centre, I think are likely to go live around July. That's the latest that I am aware of. The pedestrianised zone, though, still is in effect from 10:30 to 4:30 in terms of when vehicles can deliver and load and unload. I'm aware there have been some issues with that over the last few weeks, with businesses needing to load and unload. I think one of the challenges is, you know, prior to lockdown, we saw all the delivery vehicles up and down the high street, and it's very obvious that there was loading and unloading. I think because there are fewer vehicles now, if it's not obvious that that's taking place, then that can be an issue. But please get in touch with us if you have any concerns. It wouldn't be a discussion about place management if we didn't talk about toilets. And there's been a lot of discussion about toilets because I think even as we've seen more people come in, it's been about a 10% increase in footfall over the last 3 weeks consistently, week on week. And even more so over the weekend before last, when the weather was really good. You know, people just don't think about it as much. We're not used to having to think about, oh goodness, when I come in, I may not have access to the toilets that I had access to before. We know that Canterbury Lane and Tower Way toilets are open. There may be others across the city that are open. We know that the Fenwick toilets will be open, Marks and Spencer's won't for the moment, and we're waiting to hear about the Beanie as well. And again, we'll keep communicating about that because that's really important for the customer experience, to make sure that it's as safe and convenient as possible for them to be in the city centre. In terms of safety and security, you've probably seen more police and enforcement out and about. We certainly have. It's important to say that they don't have powers to enforce social distancing, but there will be a presence. And I think that that presence, in terms of welcoming customers, we've heard from so many of you about how you want to make sure that you're able to welcome customers, that it's a safe experience for everyone and a welcoming experience. And many of you are providing staff to help with queuing just outside your premises and to help host people as they come in as well. As a bid team, we will be out and about. We aren't bringing the ambassadors back right away, but happy to take your feedback on that. But we will be out as a team next week. In terms of communicating, we're going to continue communicating with you as much as we can. Rachel and I are here. We will be bringing certain members of the team on and off furlough as the need arises. One of the most important questions that's come up time and time again is access to finance. As Clive mentioned, Canterbury City Council actually gave out a total of 31 million in grants, and over 400 businesses in Canterbury have benefited from that. The council's now accepting applications for discretionary business grants, which are designed to help those who are ineligible with the first grant scheme who have fixed property related costs. There's some more specifications for those, and the deadline is just before midnight on Monday, the 15th of June. So have a look at our website, the council's website, and you can link through to all of that information. Just a few more things I wanted to share with you, and these are more tangible. I know some of the other things I've been talking about, we keep discussing and don't have all the, Rachel's raising her hand. Yes,
sorry, we just had a question in. You have already covered this, but could you just repeat when the Park and Ride you anticipate for it to open again?
Okay, and then this is only Park and Ride. So the question was about Park and Ride. As I understand it, Park and Ride at the moment isn't due to be open until September, but there may be council staff and members on this call who could correct me on that. I think what I would say is that's what I understand the position to be at the moment. if that changes, we will absolutely let you know. And I hope to hear a lot more information about transport in the coming few days that we'll share with you. There are also opportunities to enhance the customer experience temporarily and in the long term, and there are a few things I'd like to show you just now. One of those areas is to do with extended licenses for outdoor table and chairs, and unfortunately the information we got from KCC on Friday wasn't what we wanted to hear, and I feel we need to look into how that decision making happened, and I will be in touch with food and beverage businesses in the coming days so we can try and get more feedback through to KCC. We know that there are opportunities and challenges with it, but we feel we need to have another look at that. We're looking at whether there could be smaller events or markets throughout the city. We're also looking at a few things I'd like to show you in terms of vinyling vacant units to help people feel welcome, to help signpost, and to help people know where to go around the city. The image I'm showing you right now is Debenhams, the former Debenhams site, and this is on Guildhall Street. We've had a look at vacant units around the city, but this is the one we're going to start with, and this should go up by Friday. I'm looking to Rachel to nod, yes. So this will go up by Friday. Lovely image of the city pointing to the King's Mile, and also around the corner, a map of the city. We've looked at a lot of other possibilities of images that we could put up, ways in which we could fondly remember the things that didn't happen this summer. So I'm thinking of Pride and the medieval pageant and the wine festival, lots of other events and activities that would have happened this summer that we could perhaps put up as images on vacant units to brighten up the atmosphere and make people feel welcome, perhaps encourage some safe dwell time as well. And speaking of, we've also ordered these floor markings. They're not to try and tell people what to do, but just again to make the atmosphere more pleasant and welcoming. And these are floral markings that will go up around the city, we hope this weekend. And this is a picture of them in Leamington Spa, and they're up in a few other locations around the country as well. So those are the operational updates that I have. You may have more questions, which I'd be happy to take. They may be questions for me. They might be things to do with what Canterbury City Council is doing. And I expect that we'll hear a lot more information in the coming days. But it's really important to us that we do hear from you. We want to know what your concerns are. We want to be able to promote you. So keep us updated with everything that you're doing, and we will continue to meet with you on Zoom until we can meet together again. Our next In Conversation webinar is on the 17th of June, and that's with office-based businesses, business and professional services, and we look forward to hearing more about how the recovery phase is going for them and for you in that webinar, and you're all very welcome. So I am now going to just pause here, hand over to Rachel to see if we've got any questions, and we'd like to do a few more polls, and then we will introduce Kathy. I'll come back and introduce Kathy.
Okay, so we had a comment from the council, from Caroline, to confirm what she says, that Park and Ride hasn't been confirmed yet, but we'll communicate through the bid as soon as the position is fixed. So that's from the council. However, there has been a second question from Carl. This is Carl Elliott from Clegg's Architecture. As Park and Ride is unlikely to open until September, will city centre parking costs be reduced by the council to support business?
I don't know the answer today. And that's a really, really good question. We've fed that question through. Rachel, if you have a look at the chat while I keep talking.
Caroline says they'll come back as quickly as they can, and Robert Thomas has said watch this space.
Okay, thank you. So that's Caroline Hicks, who is the head of regeneration and property at the City Council, also on our board, and Robert Thomas, leader of the council. So thank you both for joining us today and for clarifying some of that. I know there's been a lot to work through, and that we'll hear more in the coming few days. So we are now going to we're now going to do a couple of polls, 2 polls really quickly, and then I'll introduce Kathy and we'll see if there are any more questions that come through.
So first of all, from our first poll, I wanted to apologise because we obviously have missed off a few sectors from the options that we had. One of the most important being local authority, of which we do have quite a few people here today, including the leader. So thank you very much for attending. But also places of worship and motor retail, and of course destination management. Hello, Catherine. So thank you very much for commenting on that. The next poll I am going to throw out to you all, really just to make sure you're still all awake. There are 2 questions. The first one we've actually been using, we used it last week as well, just to get an idea. And this is actually, Kathy, this is for you. So you can get a feel for what our businesses, how our businesses have been accessing support during the lockdown. So the first question is about what packages you have taken as part of the lockdown support package. There you can click as many as you want on question 1. So have you secured any of the following support for your business? And there are 10 options there, including other. And again, feel free to put that into the Q&A afterwards. The second one requires quite a bit of thought, really. The question is, which of the following do you think would give customers the most reason to return to the city? And you're only allowed to select one. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes to go through both of these questions, and I'm going to launch the polling now, and I'm going to allow panelists to answer. So Clive, you can also respond. So the first one is, have you secured any of the following support for your business? The options are bounce back loan scheme, business interruption loan scheme, charity support package, coronavirus job retention scheme, deferring VAT and income tax payments, retail, hospitality and leisure grant, rent freeze mortgage holiday, self-employed income scheme, small grant or other. And then the second question, now nobody's voted yet, so I've obviously really got people thinking. We've had one person, there we go. Which of the following do you think would give customers the most reason to return to the city? Would it be cleaning, welcome back, keep safe signage, access to toilets, sufficient transport services, outdoor licensing for tables and chairs, as Lisa's been touching on today through KCC, small manageable events in outdoor spaces, city animation, that's our floral displays and window vinyls, customer welcome, so that could be our city centre ambassadors or staff as hosts at doors, promotion of the city as open and safe or other. Have you voted, Clive?
You can access both of those polls in the save, so you just need to scroll down.
Just scroll down, yeah. Poll 2 does not appear to be functioning. We are getting people voting on poll 2 as well. Sorry, that was a message from Carl Elliott. Yeah, he was having trouble with the second question, but apparently it's fine now. So I'm going to give you 10 more seconds and then I shall launch the results.
And we should say these are anonymous. We can't see who's voting what, and it really is just a snapshot for us to get a sense of what you're thinking right now.
Right, I'm going to end the polling now. If anyone wants to press a button really quickly, that's your moment. And I've ended. And I'm going to share the results on the screen so Kathy can see a little snapshot of the Canterbury businesses. So as was the case when we did this before, the furlough leave job retention scheme seems to have been the most popular support that businesses have taken. And then interestingly, for the support for the city centre to get customers to come back, it's very much about promotion of the city. But second matter is the outdoor licensing for tables and chairs. So this is obviously something we must push through with KCC. Lisa, would you like me to pull anything else out from the poll?
No, maybe just keep it up so people can have a little look for a minute. one of the most interesting things about all the work we've been doing with you through these webinars and training sessions has been watching these polls, but also looking at the main feedback coming through. And what you said to us time and time again is you're looking for leadership, you're looking for collaboration. And I know that's challenging in a two-tiered local authority, but for us to be, reaching out, engaging with you, engaging with other decision makers, and also flexibility. That's one of the main points that has come through from all of you who have stayed open during lockdown and who are preparing for reopening now. It is, plans change every day. Guidelines change every day, and some more guidelines have, or at least new information has come out potentially about food and beverage over the last few days, and we have to wait for those guidelines to come out. But it is an ever-changing landscape. So those are three key things for us. With our webinars, if you've missed anything, it's canterburybid.co.uk. I mentioned the next one on the 17th of June. You can sign up for our e-news to get all of this information in your inbox, and that's on our website as well. And Rachel, if you want to take that down, I will now properly introduce Kathy. So Kathy Parker is a professor of retail and marketing enterprise at Manchester Metropolitan University. She's also the co-chair of the Institute of Place Management, which is where we've been getting a lot of really valuable information. And Kathy, you very cleverly shared your screen, which means I have lost your bio. Which I was reading. Kathy, you're also the you're a research lead at the BID Foundation and the High Streets Task Force. So those connections we have found really invaluable as we've been engaging with you through the Institute of Place Management and the BID Foundation, and we've also seen you in the press just in the last few days. So without further ado, I will hand over to Kathy.
Yeah, thank you. That wasn't to test you, Lisa, on my CV. Well remembered. Oh, thank you very much for the introduction, and hello Canterbury from Macclesfield. I'm delighted to be your guest speaker today. Everyone see my slides okay and hear me okay? Yeah, brilliant. So, we've already heard from Clive, this year's AGM, it feels a lot different to last year's, and we're all finding ourselves in a situation that we've never faced before. On top of the tragic deaths and illness, you'll be worried about the future of your businesses, organisations, and the future of the city. I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of good news, apart from the crisis may set you on a path from recovery to transformation, where you might swap some of the old normal that probably wasn't sustainable for some new normal, which may result in a more livable, just and resilient place. So I'm going to look at the impacts of the coronavirus and a number of indicators that help us understand how towns and cities are sort of responding. And some of this data comes from the High Street Task Force, professional research and data group, which Lisa said that I'm the research lead for. And that group's changed its terms of reference to understand the impact of COVID-19 very quickly. And the group consists of national providers of data and insight, like the Office of National Statistics and Google, as well as universities like mine and governments represented there through the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. So you can sign up and subscribe to the monthly data packs, and if you want updates on the sort of information I'm going to give you, that might be a sensible thing to do, but I'm sure Lisa already gets those. So first of all, I want to look at footfall. Footfall's always been a really important indicator for towns and cities, and whilst it's binary, people are either there or not, I think it's going to be really crucial for places to monitor their footfall for us to understand how they're recovering. And you can see from this graph here, the figures from Springboard. I know you have Springboard counters, so you're part of this data set. Footfall fell dramatically as soon as lockdown was announced, and it's remained low. The lowest was actually 90% of last year's footfall volumes. There has never been anything since anyone has been collecting footfall, even manually going back nearly 100 years, that has ever impacted on town and city footfall in this way. It's slowly started to rise. You can see a shallow trend line in there. Those peaks are usually when there's rumours about lockdown being lifted, more so than when policy actually changes. Good weather as well brings people out. And now I think we need to add public protests for a reason for footfall peaks. So I'm going to come back to footfall and your footfall data in particular, and why that's important in recovery. I just want to touch on some other indicators, and another one being social media, or to be more specific, the volume and type of communication that flows between the different stakeholders in the town, a local authority, the bid, the businesses, consumers, residents, visitors, everybody, and how that's being influenced by COVID. Now, we know from our research that regular communication and strong networks between and across these groups is one of the key drivers to success of any place. And weekly social media from across businesses has declined, and a lot of that, you know, we know staff are being furloughed, and a lot of the staff that would normally do this type of activity probably aren't working. The activities remains really low, and it's interesting to see. I've only got some towns on there. I'll pick up Canterbury, Lisa, and send you some data on that in a couple of weeks. But we can see that policy decisions there in Cardiff, in Wales, you know, as soon as it was announced that schools were not going to be opening over the summer, you know, has a big impact, you know, obviously on what businesses are doing and how they're responding. They're getting their cues as to what's happening from some of those sort of early policy announcements. So before the pandemic, there was actually always a bit of a lack of engagement between high street businesses and their communities. So before COVID, 78% of high street organisations were not active on social media, and that's despite the fact consumers are spending 2 hours, 22 minutes on social media. And we understand that that's sort of only going to get worse with COVID because of the fact that, you know, a lot of employees aren't working right now. So because actually customers are actually spending more time on social media now, but businesses are spending less. Now, I'm not saying that businesses need to be communicating about themselves, but Canterbury needs a voice, and it needs a whole choir of voices to connect and remind people and connecting with what is actually a lot of positive feeling about the local at the moment, and also how people feel about places that are special to them when they're further away. So that might be something for the bid or other organisations to think of. And you'll see why this is important when I come on to customer perceptions and sentiment a little bit later on. So now I want to look at businesses and the impact of businesses from COVID. In particular, I'm interested in town and city centre businesses. So a lot of the data that we're seeing is coming across sectors, but as the Institute of Place Management, we're really interested in those businesses and town and city centres. So we were commissioned to do this piece of research, the Institute, from the Professional Research and Data Group. And it was very much to just understand how COVID was impacting on businesses, finances, trading, loans, the type of support they were taking out. What we really wanted to know, was there a geographical or a place element to resilience? In other words, were some places just going to be more or less exposed to the COVID-19? So I'll just give you a little bit of information about the sample in the slides. South East England was the top region represented. So, you know, your region, 22% of the responses came from the South East, mostly independent businesses, less than 9 outlets, 65% of respondents, limited companies, more than half had 1 to 9 employees, 55% of those businesses said that they were closed, not currently operating at all at the moment. And around about half of the businesses having a turnover under 250,000. So your very typical town or city centre businesses. You see that the vast majority of businesses in our sample there are reporting a decrease of over 51%. And when people say unprecedented, this really is unprecedented. 67.4% of businesses, town centre businesses there, saying that their takings were 81 to 100% down on the same time last year. we also asked how long, with the current lockdown, businesses felt they could survive. The survey actually closed on the 27th of April, looking at these figures and assuming they're representative of town and city centres across the country, which they are, and I'll explain a bit more why later. Over 16% said they won't survive until the end of this month, if we think back to when they were filling this in, the end of April. Now, actually, these businesses look like they're a little bit more resilient than I thought they would be, but I think there's two things that probably explain that. All the respondents in our survey, that was over 1,000, were recruited through places that had a bid, and we know that the places that had bids often have had better and clearer communication and more support about what packages and so on are available. So I think that's helped them. And the other point to note is that the timing of the survey. I think we thought lockdown was quite binary then. This is a comment that I made in the Times on Saturday. We were either in lockdown and we were going to get support from the government, or we get out of lockdown, everything was back to normal again. Actually, now we know that's really not going to be the case. So I think if we ran the survey again now, things might be quite different. So let's just recreated your poll there. You can see that that's very, very typical response. Most of the respondents, or 70% of the respondents, used the furloughing scheme. But actually, when you add this up, it's over 96% of businesses has either already received or were applying for some sort of government support. So the sheer scale of this impact has shown, how and why the government has had to act in the way that it has in terms of the economic package. So finally, we used the survey findings to build a model of business resilience so we could identify the places that may be most at risk from COVID-19. And we didn't find geographical location was statistically significant. So our model is based on the type of businesses that you have in your town or city centre rather than where your centre is. And we actually think that's probably quite a sensible model, because we don't know, and this is a very new threat to our town and city centres, and we didn't want to assume that the previous success of a town or a city was necessarily going to ensure that they were more resilient against this risk. So having a look at the vulnerable sectors there, and I'm sure there's no surprises for anybody, the ones in red are the most vulnerable, and these are our typical town centre businesses: retail, food and non-food, and food and beverage, also personal services, the sort of businesses that need people there to provide them. The type of businesses that can be where people can work from home, professional services, more business to business type organisations as well, that might not have had their customer base so much in the town centre, even though they may have been located in there, are more resilient. Some of the most interesting things we found out from the survey was from the qualitative information we got. We did just ask a straightforward question at the end of the survey, saying, is there anything else you'd like to tell us? And pretty much everyone from the 1,000 respondents did tell us something. And these are the themes that we brought out of that. And it was interesting. That was a sort of early warning, really, for us, that we could take back to government about the sort of anxiety about how is lockdown going to end and what does that mean to my business? And as that is the key issue right now, I think it's not so much about whether we're going to come out of lockdown or not. We know we are going to, but with physical distancing and other disruptive factors like that, obviously that has a huge impact on some businesses, their business model, and ultimately their profitability and whether they can survive. So it was really clear from our analysis that the retailers and the majority of personal services and your typical town centre businesses are the ones that are most affected by the COVID-19 crisis. Maybe a slight bit of good news there for you at the bottom, in that there may be a little bit of financial leeway, a little bit more financial resilience in businesses in the south, but we didn't actually find that was statistically significant. So it's not going to make a big difference. So I just want to very quickly touch on some consumer sentiment. And I think these some interesting things here. This just showing really the dilemma that the government's in, you know, just representing the public there. You know, people are concerned about health, but of course they're also concerned about their livelihood and the economy, and sometimes those two objectives conflict. There's an uneasiness about customers returning to some sorts of businesses. They will perceive some as safer than others, and a lot of that will be to do with the proximity of other customers, how long they're in environments. The other thing to perhaps mention or talk about, which doesn't get talked about a lot because we talk so much about physical distancing, is still the risk of transmission of the virus from touching surfaces. The virus can stay on certain substances, and so therefore, you know, the idea of reassuring everyone all the time about cleanliness and hygiene, I think is going to be really, really important. Of course, there's some age and gender distinctions to this. Young people are feeling a little bit more positive about returning, probably because they're not as vulnerable to the virus, and there's a gender distinction as well. But you usually find that in terms of how women tend to feel about public space for a variety of reasons. It is coming down, this percentage of people reporting that they want to avoid crowded places, which is good. And I think another very important message to get across is how many people can socially distance in an environment. I've seen some pictures on Twitter where people are sort of up in arms saying, oh my goodness, look at all these people in this space. But actually, when I've gone and looked and calculated it on Google Maps, it's okay. People, there's enough space for that. And I think you'll need to get that message across that when people come back to the city centre, you know, just because there's some other people there doesn't mean to say that that's crowded. So think about sort of capacity and getting that message across. You know, there's always the sort of consumer sort of psychology to think into as well. And again, I suppose this really sort of says, you know, there's different ways people are reacting to lockdown, which we'd expect. I think the thing that was interesting to me, okay, is that the 9% of the UK that identify as being resisting. So I think it's 9% of the population, but 58% of the sample in this study from King's College. I think there's too much of a fuss being made about the coronavirus. But the thing is, that resisting group are the ones 65% most likely to suffer economic impact from the crisis. So that sort of explains people not, you know, it's sort of cognitive dissonance, if you like. You know, if you know you've got to go out to work to earn money to put food on the table, it's hard to then have in your mind the same sort of thinking that you're actually risking your life, and that's a very dangerous thing to do. So I think, you know, a lot of this can be explained just by a sort of understanding of sort of consumer psychology and just, you know, people just not having to get on with their lives and make some sort of, their attitudes will be affected by the situations they find themselves in. Some other interesting things there about holidays. We've heard a lot about staycations and so on, but at the moment people are thinking, well, you know, they want to have some hope. They do still want to go on holidays. They will they're not thinking that they're going to spend less. And this is another interesting sort of conflict as well, that conflict I mentioned earlier between the health and the environment. Well, here's one here between the environment and the economy, sorry, health and the economy, and here's one here between the economy and the environment. So let's, in terms of consumer sentiment, a little bit of good news. PricewaterhouseCoopers customer sentiment survey, although it said 18% of shopping habits, people will shop more online, 22% have reported they'll spend more on their local high street. And there has been a real outpouring of support for local businesses, which, you know, I very much hope will continue post-COVID. And again, just that same survey actually saw a bit of an improvement in customer sentiment there between March and April. the interesting thing too, and I haven't shown you the previous years, is that if you go back to when sentiment dropped like this, the last time would have been 2008, the financial crisis. And it dropped a lot more than it's dropped with so far with COVID. So I'm really watching this survey like a hawk, because it's such a good indicator of the economy. You know, it correlates very, very well. They've been doing it for quite a long time. So it should give us a little bit of early warning or early optimism, perhaps, because if customers stay more confident and say they're going to spend money, then we will make that bounce back that we've been promised. And, you know, I think the very personal nature of the crisis, because individuals can mitigate their risks by their behaviour, as well as the localised nature of the problem, what you do as a city, but also, you know, unfortunately, what's going on in the region may not always be helpful. Like if you're here in the northwest, our R's gone above 1. So this is why I think actually the recovery is going to be very place-based and very regionalised. We can't really say this is going to be the same across the whole country. You need to be looking at what's happening in your region and in your city. So let's have a look then at some data from Canterbury. So I had a quick look at your footfall, and your footfall look between 2018 and 2019 was very stable, only a 0.8% drop, compared with a minus 0.43% drop across the southeast. So that means, you know, that's a very good or very strong position to be in. Not many places can say that they're maintaining their footfall in that way. You're obviously a regional centre in terms of the volume of people that it attracts, around about 10 million. And because you're sort of towards the larger type of regional centre, it shows that you're drawing in, or used to draw in before COVID anyway, a large number of visitors from a wide or densely populated catchment as well, in terms of visitors that are coming for employment or education. Annual footfall just tells us how many people are visiting, but footfall data also helps us look for patterns to see when people visit, and that enables us to build typologies of towns. And I know everyone always says there's no one size fits all. Well, there isn't. I mean, at least here we're saying there's 4 sizes fits all. It's not, every place is unique, but it does help to start to sort of classify towns and look at their similarities. And we've done that just by looking at monthly footfall patterns. So if we look at Canterbury, we find your signature is closer to the multifunctional town type or city type. And that might explain your stronger footfall performance. I mean, put it in really simple terms, a multifunctional town or city, all your eggs aren't in one basket. You've got lots and lots of different reasons for people to visit, and that's why you're busy during, you know, it's pretty flat throughout the year. As one sort of group of people comes and goes, another one replaces them. Plus you've got good employment and a residential, I would say, a nearby residential population. I didn't really know what happened. Maybe someone tell me what happened in 2019 there with that dip in November. That's the only sort of time that you don't follow such a, you know, it's a very sort of, you're a textbook multifunctional location there.
Kathy, sorry to interrupt. That was actually, the camera was blocked by scaffolding.
Well, that's it. That's technology.
If we look at 2018 and 2017, yeah, be a little bit different.
Okay, right. Well, okay. So this is an important point, because you've actually impacted in the whole of the footfall for the southeast with that bit of scaffolding. That's why it's so important to get this local knowledge. So there you go. When people in government are looking at southeast performance of the footfall, we'll have to let them know that that someone put some scaffolding up in front of a counter. So, I mean, we'll be giving you access to a dashboard through the High Street Task Force in a couple of months. You'll be able to play around with this and think how near or far is your signature from other types of towns. I think that's going to be important after COVID. Perhaps not so much for you because you're already multifunctional, but I can see some town types changing quite significantly. It's been interesting to look at the town types throughout the lockdown, because the multifunctional ones have tended to sort of do, I mean, it's normally the comparison towns that have the strongest footfall performance, but multifunctional. And the holidays, when everybody gets in their car and drives places to go on the beach and so on, have also been performing pretty well. I didn't say performing pretty well, that's just pre-COVID language. You know what I mean. Okay, so your weekly signature, you have a Saturday peak, which is in line with the fact that you're an important regional centre and you draw from a wider catchment. This is pre-COVID. You have an all-day economy, which again is in line with a multifunctional type of place. So you've got lots going on in the evening, or more going on in the evening as well, and residents and people that will sort of be using the city at different times of the day. So if we just go back to Sunday, 78.2% down in the UK, and that was just one day. And your figures are pretty similar, a little bit more because you're multifunctional, which means that there's been more reasons for people to visit even under lockdown. You've just got a nice environment for people to stroll around, to do their exercise, to jog, to cycle. You've got essential food stores and so on. So there's things that are still bringing people back. I think what's going to be interesting perhaps is the sort of weekly and daily profiles and how they might change from COVID, especially as more people work from home. So, those Saturday peaks might not, we just might not see so many people commuting, which means, they might just have more time to do things sort of throughout the week. So lockdowns change footfall volumes, but it's also influenced footfall patterns. And that's why I think it's going to be crucial to keep an eye on your footfall, your daily footfall patterns, because I don't know what you're going to emerge into. What will you recover back into? You need to sort of really understanding the type of place that you're recovering into, as well as the one that you were perhaps before. Oh, sorry. No wonder. Sorry about this. I've been pressing a button and you haven't seen these. So apologies for that. I'll send you, well, you've got the links, I think, Lisa, so you can send these around. Okay, so having a look back to our COVID-19, Canterbury actually comes out 560th out of the 745 English towns and cities that we've got in our database for exposure. That means you do have a high amount of at-risk businesses and potentially quite a lot of interdependencies between those high-risk businesses. That's probably the education being part of that, and the hotels and other types of businesses. We are going to factor in the GVA, the contribution of those businesses to the economy. That might change this a little bit. So I wouldn't sort of be too concerned right now. But I think we've got to be, as Lisa said, a bit realistic. And the thing is that no town or city is immune to outside shocks. You couldn't have had the perfect basket of businesses because you weren't expecting COVID-19. None of us were. Places are constantly challenged by changing technology, consumer demands, societal norms, economic peaks and troughs. What's really key is adaptability, and I think that's what we need to focus on now. Unfortunately, some businesses won't survive. I mean, in terms of education, some students won't come back. But in my sector, higher education, the international expansion that many universities have benefited from financially was never really sustainable. We wouldn't always attract so many students from Asia. It's not a sustainable model. So finally, I just want to end with the road of recovery. So rather than just call it the road of recovery, I think we need to think about transformation too. So the recovery framework that you've been using includes transformation at the end, but it's a little bit simplistic because it just has one arrow that goes, there you are, you've recovered, woof, straight to transformation. I don't think it's really going to be like that. I think that path is going to be very long. We've learned a lot already about adaptability, and that is going to be key in the future. And what we've learned about adaptable places from COVID already is that immediately, as soon as the crisis hit, there was lots of action. Nobody really waited. They just started getting on what was needed to be done. There was a lot of open communication across the sectors, either digitally, webinars, people picking up the phone, all those things. There's been a lot of talking and discussion. Adaptable Places have got an adopted plan, so people know what the plan is and they're working to it. So it's good to see you've adopted the framework, which I know has been adopted across Europe, America, Australia. It's a very loose way of just getting everybody on the same page, which is important. The partnerships are crucial. This is a massive problem. No one can solve it on their own. We've all got to work together. And those are a great foundation for the next stages, which I think we'll need to go through to take adaptability from recovery to transformation. Leadership and governance, this is an opportunity. If things haven't worked, groups haven't worked, new place leaders have come, that have come out of the woodwork, who've, had an important role representing the community, business, whoever they are, they've got to be included in new leadership and governance models. A new collaborative vision might need to be formed. People are ambitious about the future. We see a lot of sort of like social change, and unrest, a lot of concern about the environment. There's some very big ambitions here that our towns and cities, people will expect to be delivered in the future. This idea of placefulness, that places, are unique, what's special about them, people want to connect to them. They don't want sort of bland, meaningless mission statements and so on. They want to feel part of something. And we've certainly seen that through COVID, and that's something very special that people want to take forward. And finally, multifunctionality is the key. You're already there in terms of your signature. You'll need to keep an eye on your footfall and the business and organisational mix and the changes, strategies that you adopt to make sure that you have more baskets and more eggs, and we perhaps value some more of the smaller and the more innovative things that come through, because they in turn will perhaps give us they are the sort of green shoots and our sort of route into what we hope is a better future. So thank you very much.
Kathy, thank you so much. There was a lot of information in there, and thank you for the time just looking at our footfall data as well. Just speaking of that, there is one question that's come through from Carl Elliott, who is a partner at Clegg Architects in Canterbury. He's also on our board. Can the one camera we have give us the level of data we need? I would like your view on that. Certainly we've felt no. It's useful comparing year on year. That can be somewhat useful, but prior to the crisis we had hoped to put in another footfall counter in the city, and of course there are the footfall counters in the shopping centre as well. That's where we were at. I'd be interested in your view.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that you've got one. There's only, I mean, we get Springboard share this data with us for research purposes, but we've only got 200 places covered in the UK, and there's 1,300 sort of, small medium towns and above. So it's really good you've got one. The more you have, you get more of a micro sort of insight into what's happening. So they can really help, especially if there's parts of the city, there's a regeneration scheme going on or something that, that's particular about a particular area. But actually, and I mean, I'm not trying to sell Springboard counters here, but that's good job probably. But the signature of your town is quite a dominant one. That won't really change. You won't, if you didn't put a counter somewhere else and then find, oh, that bit's comparison. It doesn't really work like that. And that sort of shows how interconnected, places are, perhaps in a way that we haven't really thought they were, because everyone really concentrates on the retail core. So when we started sort of seeing that places were putting counters in other areas of their city, the overall signature doesn't tend to change. It might be if you're somewhere like Great Yarmouth and you put one sort of on the end of a pier or something, the other one's in the town centre, those things can make a bit of a difference. But on the whole, your signature is your signature.
There's just a follow-up question there about will the addition of city centre Wi-Fi allow us to add more counters more easily? So we have been in discussion with the council about rolling out city centre Wi-Fi through a digital CCTV camera upgrade that the council's undertaking, and perhaps perhaps the bids could help ensure that the coverage is as wide as possible. So that's the Wi-Fi project. Could we might need more technical expertise. I don't know whether we could make some use of that.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've worked with Springboard because they've given us the data. So we haven't worked with any providers. So our research is based on that data. We did get Wi-Fi data from Springboard. We did do a research project with Cardiff University on that. It's a different type of data. You're finding different things out from that. So I'd say it augments, you know, if you want to know sort of like dwell times and the type of people that are coming. But it is a different, you know, it's not so good at counting the number of people as a counter, because it relies on people having devices.
Okay. Yeah. No, thank you. We've had another question through. Has any modelling been undertaken on a second lockdown and the impact?
No, not as yet. I mean, I think we'd have to go and survey again, and I think that's going to be localised now. I mean, I would hope we're not going to in a situation where it's a national lockdown. But as I said, in the northwest here, RR is over 1. I mean, that is disputed, I suppose, whether they think it's 1 in. Certainly, the public health authorities here think it is. So I suppose what we'll need to do if that happens is look at the impact that it has in, you know, when that happens, rather than assume, a bit like I said about that survey we did in April. I think the world's moved on from April. In April, people thought when lockdown ended, that would be it. And we know that that's not going to be it. So the social distancing, those sort of measures are going to be very disruptive on business. So actually, I'm starting to think we probably need to just do another survey and model what those impacts are as well. Because if you're a small cafe or something like that, and you're told you can open, but you've still got to ensure social distancing, and you're worried about people using the toilets and those sort of things, then that's going to massively impact on your business. So we need to know those things.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It'd be interesting for us now to look at what we need to do as we're in this pre-recovery phase, and what investments to make when. I think it's going to be a tricky time. I'm just looking at the Q&A in chat. I can't see anything at the moment, so I'll waffle on for a couple of seconds to encourage more questions.
Lisa, can you hear me, Lisa?
Yeah.
No, Kathy, is it an unfair question, but has any of your research indicated any markers that might be relevant to determine whether a town recovers quickly or slowly? You said earlier that every location needs a voice, so there's an element of whether it's social media or PR or whatever. Is it a function of perhaps heritage? We're lucky in Canterbury, we've got lots of wonderful heritage. You said that some cities can be a bit bland. I don't think Canterbury could ever be described as bland, but have you got any thoughts as to which locations will recover quickly and which ones won't?
Well, I think if you're multifunctional, then you've got a head start, definitely, because you're just not, you've got more of a mix of businesses. I suppose the concern when we look at the impact of COVID is that mix of businesses may be underpinned by sectors that might be, education and tourism, being.
So could I ask you, on your stats, when you said Canterbury was 560th out of 745, I wasn't clear whether that was a good result or a bad. No. Would I rather be number 100 or would I rather be number 700?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you'd rather be number 1.
I'd rather be number 100. So
yeah.
560 then is the lower quartile.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, let us go back and do some GVA modelling on that as well, and come back to you. But I think what that does say is that you've got a lot of those businesses that are vulnerable. That's all that's telling you at this time, and the interdependencies of those businesses. So, you know, the ones that drive the sort of economy and sort of generate money for other people. Maybe.
I think that's right, because especially with higher education, well, education actually, and tourism, and the way our city relies on that. So we need to keep a close eye on what happens and how we can
adapt.
How we can adapt and manage the next year in particular.
It is adaptability that is the key to success. You know, that nowhere is, you know, even you know, I can give you lots of sort of examples of, you know, very historic and beautiful places around the country that, you know, that are sort of economic wastelands, if you like. You know, that isn't on its own enough. The adaptability is very, very crucial, and that's what this slide sort of says. These are the things to be really sort of thinking about, is how can you mobilize people to adapt, you know, so not everyone's just being atomistic and doing a sort of like doing their own thing. You know, that's sort of moving towards a sort of vision that's sort of going to be positive, you know, for the location. And as you lose one sort of group of visitors, what would replace that? You know, what with students, you know, that's I was talking to Lisa when I was getting the brief for this gig. You know, students do come with problems. You know, they come with money and so on, but you know, there's other tensions that they cause. So, you know, it is sometimes seeing the opportunities in some of those things, and the smaller, often, you know, smaller businesses can be more agile. It's easier for them to change their focus of what they're doing. You know, a sort of big housing block that's been built, you know, it's custom built for student accommodation. That's more difficult to adapt.
Yeah, I mean, exactly that. I think we're going to have to pay close attention to it, and we absolutely love our universities. We want them to do well for all sorts of reasons, but you know, perhaps the displacement of students. You know, one of the things we were talking about is would more people want to live in and around this area as opposed to big cities? So, in a way, you know, of course, we want our universities to be successful, but we also look to other opportunities through all this. So I think the inward investment. I'm going to stop talking. So I see 2 questions coming in, and Kathy, I know you have to leave us at 25 past to go to a very urgent, important call, which we want you to do with MHCLG. A question from Connie Nolan, who's one of our counsellors. I'm interested in the reinvention. People are bored and want safe socialising. Would this be an opportunity for pop-ups?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good, again, the ultimate in adaptability, you know, something that could be there 1 minute and gone the next. You can trial things out and experiment. You know, that's why markets have made such a comeback. And anything, you know, as soon as you invest in building something and making it permanent, and if it's the wrong decision, you're sort of stuck with it. So it's always great to trial things out, you know, and make things, you know, I think that's why the outdoor space is going to be so important as well, obviously, with social distancing. We're not just going to see pop up, we're going to see pop out of businesses as they, you know, as they want to trade, and customers want to be in, you know, what is going to be a safer place. Outside is safer than being inside.
Yeah, and we also wonder, we're so used to having really big scale events throughout the spring and summer, and those have been mostly postponed instead of cancelled. So we kind of are hoping for a do-over next summer in a way, but of course we have to adapt and wonder about, you know, smaller events that we could trial over the coming months.
Yeah, again, it's looking at this as an opportunity, trial and experimentation and innovation. You know, if you can't do things on a big scale, but you can do something on a small scale, then perhaps you can do something that was a bit more risky that no one would have let you do on a big scale, and see how it works out.
We've got one final question here, which is what percentage of levy do you expect to be able to collect in the next bid financial year? Now, that's a question for us, but it's also a question we're discussing with the Bid Foundation, and we'll be doing that a bit more tomorrow as well. I mean, bids are governed by legislation. There's certain things we have to do, which is that we have to communicate once a year in the form of a levy bill. But the answer to exactly how that will work at this point in time, we don't know. And I know, Kathy, you've been involved in some of those conversations with others at the BID Foundation as well.
Yeah, and I mean that was very much the sort of ask of government, which was, you know, this is the bids can't access the same pots of funding that other businesses can, but you know, government knows how important they are, and that's why additional, you know, some additional funding was made available. Now I know that's a very small amount of money, and I think we need to keep looking at that, because I know that government very much values the contribution of bids, because they're crucial in terms of, you know, the next step, the recovery and regeneration. We can see that where there's bids, we get, you know, all these blobs, it just happens easier. We've seen, you know, that the councils, for lots of reasons, you know, not having a lot of money being one of the main ones, you know, a lot of these things are difficult for them. And so they, you know, they need strong bids, they need partners on the ground who network the businesses, who can, and also, you know, it was a great model that you've got here with community represented, you know, on your board as well. It makes such a difference, because people can talk to each other quickly and make decisions, and even more importantly, take action. So we're not going to, you know, government's definitely going to want to keep supporting bids, and I think, you know, if that's very much the thing that we need to keep that message going back to government, to ensure that, you know, you can continue to do the important work you do.
Yeah, no, so yeah, watch this space. We'll be working on all of that. There is one last question. Is there a need for local authorities to review their historic city town centre local plans that are now out of date? Speaking of adaptability.
Yeah, I mean, it's all, you always need to review plans. I mean, it's a sad thing about plan, and it's almost as soon as you've done it, it's out of date. You know, having those overall principles, visions and values, I think are sort of really important for places, because if they've got those and everybody understands what those are, not saying plans aren't important, of course they are, but you know, the big thinking and the big picture can be done in sort of in frameworks and those things, and then the plan should be around the detail.
Yeah, of course, the National Planning Policy Framework is, the legal aspects of this are tricky, but yeah, no, I think it does need to be done. I'm aware you have to go very soon, so we will stay on to say our thank yous and mention a few things that are coming up. But Kathy, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm really sorry I have to go so quickly, but I'm on a call with MHDLG about footfall. So,
well,
okay,
we will let you go do that. Thank you very much.
I have to do the wave. I have to do the Zoom wave. Bye.
So thank you everyone for joining us today. Clive, I'm just looking, I think we've answered all the questions. Yes, we have.
Oh, well, thank you everyone for coming today. I very much hope next year we'll be back in the Cathedral Lodge and having a real meeting. But it worked well today. Attendance was very similar to what we had last year, which was very pleasing, because not everyone can get these virtual meetings quite like the way they can get real meetings. It was great having Kathy along, and she left some interesting footprints. I like the idea of adaptability, and hopefully we can all agree that Canterbury has the skill and the nous to actually address that issue and push forward. As I said earlier, we're lucky we've got an excellent bid team, we've got some excellent directors, but of course, I guarantee we haven't got all the best answers. And with 60 or so of you listening in, please don't feel shy. I'm sure each of you have got your own suggestions as to how we can address the adaptability agenda and actually make Canterbury come out of the virus problems faster than it might otherwise. So please feed through to Lisa or to others any ideas you might have. So thank you once again, Lisa, for sorting this all out today and leading the bid so well. I've been really impressed with 60% of your team being furloughed. I've been very, very impressed and grateful to you and Rachel for the way in which you've pulled it all together and ensure that our service to our levy payers hasn't been impaired, notwithstanding the need for us to abandon certain of the events that we had lined up. So Lisa mentioned our next conversation, 17th of October, which is next Wednesday, isn't it?
Or June, but
Sorry?
or June, 17th of June.
June, sorry, June, which is based on office-based workers professionals. We've got some very good contributors for that session. What other highlights we got coming up, Lisa?
Well, the hanging flower baskets are up. There's a lot of activity, as Caroline Hicks and Robert Thomas were jumping in on earlier. A lot of things that will happen around the city centre, so graffiti cleaning, pavement cleaning, more information about parking. But really next week is going to be really key as we see more reopenings and want people to come back in a safe and sustainable way. So we will be out and about. We also have welcomed back one member of our team off furlough this week, Kathy Moulton, who's come back for a couple of weeks to help with just with all the publicity around that, supporting businesses in Canterbury and Bloom. So we will be, you know, bringing the team back in a flexible way when we need to make sure we can deliver.
Good, thank you. And for those who didn't hear earlier, today's AGM will be available on our website and Kathy's slides as well. Good, well, thank you all. There's no other questions. We'll close here. Thanks for coming.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.